It is Thursday, July 14th, and you were listening to another edition of the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. My name is Blair Angulo. Thank you so much for tuning in. A lot of activity across the country in recruiting, and we are continuing our summer slump series, looking at some of the schools that are, in a way, struggling through the dog days of summer. We've got Auburn up next, and to do so, joining us is Christian Clemente. He covers the Auburn Tigers for Auburn Undercover, the Auburn website on the 24/7 Sports Network. Christian, first of all, how are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me on too. And you talked about busy summer for some of these schools in recruiting. Well, not particularly at Auburn, at least over the past couple weeks. So,
Covering Auburn recruiting, have you been taking a vacation?
I will say it's honestly been a challenge. It's been a little tough. It does make me get a little creative in terms of what stories to do and stuff like that. I think it was LSU has 9 commitments this month, and I was like, well, that'd be kind of nice just to have commitments flowing. But it's been a good challenge in terms of having different creative ideas and kind of expanding what I'm used to doing a little bit. So
Yeah, you've had to go into your bag of tricks, Christian,
yeah,
to churn out some content. To put that into context for our listeners that maybe are unfamiliar with Auburn recruiting, only 4 commitments right now in the 2023 recruiting cycle. They are number 70th nationally. So you've got 69 other schools ahead of them in the team composite recruiting rankings right now as we head into the middle of July. And this is one of those things that you wonder, you kind of sit back, you scratch your head, and you ask yourself, how is Auburn in this situation?
yeah. I mean, for me, and really, it all kind of fizzles back down to that February thing. If you go back and remember where the school internally investigated into Brian Harsin and his program. And it really looked bad for Harsin there for a little bit in terms of him being able to stay at Auburn. They end up working it out and they're not able to find anything. And he ends up sticking as Auburn's coach. But the problem is now it's made recruiting near impossible for this staff. I mean, I really would struggle. I'm not trying to make an excuse here for them because you have to get results no matter what. But I would struggle to find a coaching staff that has a harder job recruiting right now because not only are you going against Alabama and Georgia and Clemson, some of your biggest rivals and different schools down in the Southeast area, but every other school can just, and it's what they're doing. They're telling every recruit, this coaching staff, you may like this guy. They're not going to be there when you get there. So why would you commit to them? Because they're not going to be there. So Auburn's kind of they're really having to fight through that. I would give Auburn credit for the month of June in terms of getting kids on campus and building those relationships. But obviously, you need to get commitments out of that. And that's where Auburn has struggled. You do get a couple there at the beginning of July, but you'd like to see a couple more as well. And it's really kind of created a situation where Auburn's going to need to show up on the field this fall, and they're going to really need to have a good start to the season. And if they don't, this recruiting class will probably, I mean, I'm not even going to say it's going to crumble because it's already not in a good spot, but it won't finish where Auburn needs to be in recruiting. But if you do win, you've done a good enough job building relationships that I do think Auburn has potential to flip some guys and get some guys on board and kind of salvage the class.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. You wonder about him being possibly a lame duck coach, right? Like, how long is he going to be there? We saw how that affected Clay Helton when he was at USC the last few years before he was ultimately fired and replaced with Lincoln Riley. You would have never expected to see the USC Trojans at the bottom of the Pac-12 recruiting rankings, but a couple years ago it happened, right? Like, I think recruits want to know that the coach that they are talking to is going to actually follow through on some of the recruiting pitches, some of the playing time promises, some of the development promises. I think it's so relationship based. Has Auburn or the administration, have they done anything to try to appease things or to try to help Brian Harsin in what is really a huge obstacle?
They really haven't. And that's been part of the biggest issue there. And I was talking about it with someone the other day as well, because, Auburn loses Keldrick Falk to Florida State. Brock Glenn, the quarterback, appears to be trending to Florida State as well. And you look at it and it's like, well, Mike Norvell hasn't had that much of a better tenure really at Florida State. Things aren't maybe all that stable there. So, why would they go to Florida State over Auburn? Well, Florida State has come out and openly supported Norvell. They've given, the boosters and administration have given him support. And Auburn really hasn't done that. They haven't given Brian Harsin enough support in terms of making these players and their families feel comfortable enough that, Brian Harsin still will be here in the future. So to answer your question, there hasn't been enough support, and it's clearly shown up in recruiting so far.
Yeah, I do feel like there's been a huge question mark with Brian Harsin's recruiting ability, even when he got to Auburn from Boise State. I think everyone wondered or questioned whether or not that was a big enough hire or a big enough name or a coach that could attract elite talent. Auburn and its recruiting speaks for itself. It's been a national power for such a long time. It's able to go into living rooms and really attract top talent. I think they're in some heavyweight battles year in and year out. But with Brian Harsin, not only having some of that tumultuous part of his tenure there, but the uncertainty moving forward has made things difficult there. Do you feel like there's any way to salvage this? Is there a way for him to potentially be in the green or to see the light heading into the season? Or is it just about hoping that they catch lightning in the bottle and win a lot of football games and hopefully turn this around and then parlay that into some recruiting success?
Yeah, heading into the season, I really don't see it. I think, they're at 4 commitments now. I think if you can get to 7 by the time the season starts, that would be a win. And I really don't know if they'll be able to get to 7. Now, with that said, you did see with last year's recruiting class, you saw kind of a flurry there at the end where they got a lot of commitments closer to signing day, some flips, a guy like Robert Woodyard from Alabama and Jadarian Rim from LSU. So, and they finished, I think, 21st overall in the 24/7 Sports Composite. So there is kind of a blueprint there at Auburn under Brian Harsin in terms of being able to finish at the end. Now, you saw February's signing day didn't go very well, but December's they finished overall pretty strong, I would say, considering the circumstances. So there is a way where this class can still be salvaged and finish pretty well. They've done a fantastic job building the relationships. And even these kids, when they commit elsewhere, when I talk to them or I talk to their parents, they say, we love Auburn. We're just not sure. We're just not sure if it's going to be stable or not. And so if they see that this fall, if they see the team winning, if they, they believe in these, they like these coaches and they think they're really good. They just don't know if they'll be playing for them. So if Auburn can put together a strong season, put together for Auburn, I think 7-8 wins this season would be pretty strong given the team and, the schedule. If they can do that, this recruiting class can certainly turn around. But I really don't think it'll be turning around here in the next couple weeks or couple months. It'll take a little bit for it to happen.
Christian, you mentioned that they could hopefully get to 7, maybe 6 commitments here heading into the season. What's on the board for the Auburn Tigers? Give us maybe a glimmer of hope if Auburn fans are listening to potentially what could happen here in the next month or two.
Yeah, so I think the name that you really have to watch out for is J.C. Hart. He's a guy who's ranked in the 24/7 rankings, not in the composite. He's a local kid out of Lochapoka, which is right here, kind of in the Auburn area. And he camped at Auburn last year, was really good, really didn't have, I don't even know if he had an offer at that point from any school, but he's racked up some offers now. He has great size at like 6'2". He ran a 4.37 at Auburn's camp this summer, ended up getting an Auburn offer as well. And now he's nearing a decision. So I think that could be kind of maybe a hidden gem a little bit that Auburn picks up. Auburn seems to like him. So even though he's not necessarily high in the rankings, Auburn feels pretty good about him. And then some other names that I would really look out for would be a couple of maybe the Langston Hughes guys. Auburn's been recruiting 4 2023 kids out of Langston Hughes. Jelani Thurman, a tight end who he'll be committing on the 17th. I don't expect that to be to Auburn though. But the other names that I would look out for are Joshua Horton, the defensive tackle, and Bo Hewley, the offensive tackle, who's committed to Georgia. Auburn's put in a lot of work in on those two to go along with safety commit Terrence Love, who committed, I think, back in April. So you could maybe see Horton and Hewley in the foreseeable future. I think that'll probably last maybe a little bit closer to the start of the season or in the season, maybe kind of there in the middle. But those are guys at least getting closer and possible guys for Auburn in the near future. And then I would also look at Lewis Carter, a linebacker out of Tampa, Florida. although I think Oklahoma is probably trending there. So it's slim pickings a little bit, but in Auburn's defense, they're not just taking anybody. They're playing their board. They're trying to get their guys, and if their guys commit elsewhere, they'll expand the board a little bit, but they're still going to really keep recruiting those guys and working for a flip later on down the road.
Yeah, and this staff, I'm sure, is also trying to utilize the transfer portal, right? They are, in a way, I think, recognizing that it might be harder to convince the high school prospect right now to join them, and they can maybe take some reclamation projects or some players that need a second chance or a player that needs a fresh start somewhere new. And Auburn could be that potential landing spot. Have you noticed them trying to be a bit more creative in how they're able to attract talent?
Yeah, absolutely. They attacked the transfer portal pretty hard this past offseason. They brought in 10 different transfers. In this upcoming class, the plan is to bring in like 30, 31 prospects. And
Yeah.
I would expect maybe probably close to 10 again would be transfers. And part of that will be because of the guys that they're losing. Almost the entire offensive line will be graduating. So it's great. You need to bring in high school guys to develop, and that's something that Auburn has not done over the past couple of years. So you really need to do that now. But you also need to bring in transfers, guys that are able to play right away, because you can't just bring in a high school freshman and plug him in at left tackle in the SEC. That's not going to work, and Auburn recognizes that as well. So you're seeing the transfer portal, and Auburn's aware of that going into this next offseason. They're aware they're going to need to hit the portal. And then I would also look at JUCO a little bit as well. They're looking at a guy, Derek Hunter, who was playing defensive line, offensive line, a little bit of both at Texas A&M. He ends up going to a junior college, and now he's looking to transfer back up, and he'll be at Auburn for Big Cat Weekend at the end of July. He doesn't have an Auburn offer yet, but I'd expect that to change probably pretty soon. So Auburn's looking at the portal a little bit, and also looking at some JUCO guys that will be able to step in right away in this upcoming class.
Yeah, Auburn behind schools like Central Michigan, Western Michigan, East Carolina, Houston, San Diego State, a few of the names that are ahead of the Auburn Tigers right now in the Composite team recruiting rankings. Christian, thank you so much for joining us. And full disclosure, by the way, you might get some more activity. It's been proven that once we feature a team in the Summer Slump series, they pick up their recruiting. We saw it with Florida recently. Michigan's been getting some buzz, and now hopefully we get you off the couch and get you back to work.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily count on it, but hey, I'll take to make life a little easier for me in terms of writing stories. I'll take all the commitments I can get over here.
All right, that is Christian Clemente. Remember, you can follow all his work over at Auburn Undercover, the Tigers website on the 24/7 Sports Network. For Christian, I am Blair Angulo, and our producer, Lance Glenn. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. And make sure you stay locked in to 24/7 Sports this weekend as the crew heads down to the state of Florida to cover everything Future 50, one of the marquee events of the summer.